Billionaire pretends to be asleep to test his black cleaning lady's daughter, and freezes when he sees what she does. The safe was wide open, displaying piles of cash that represented more than most people earn in a lifetime. Thomas Mitchell remained motionless in his leather armchair, breathing steadily, his eyes half open, watching her every move. Little Jasmine, only 6 years old, entered the office holding her mother Diana's hand. The two had arrived for the night shift, as they had done for the past 2 years at Thomas's company. The girl wore her miniature pink gloves, a gift Diana had bought to make her daughter feel useful while accompanying her during the school holidays. Thomas had planned this moment meticulously. After discovering that his partner had embezzled $3 million, his trust in humanity was shattered. At 45, he had built an empire, but now he wondered if there was a single honest person in the world. The test was simple. Leave the safe open with a fortune in plain sight and see if anyone could resist the temptation. Diana began cleaning the bookshelves, focused on her work. Jasmine, curious like all children, approached the table where Thomas was sleeping. Her little eyes sparkled at the sight of so much money, more than she had ever seen in her life. Thomas held his breath, preparing to witness yet another disappointment. But what happened next left him completely paralyzed. Jasmine didn't touch the money. Instead, she noticed that the bills were disorganized and began to arrange them carefully, separating them by denomination and stacking them with the precision of a little accountant. Her little hands worked with impressive delicacy, as if she were handling something sacred. "Mommy," she whispered, "Mr. Thomas's money was all messy. I tidied it up just like you taught me to do with our coins at home." Diana turned quickly, startled. "Jasmine, you can't touch the boss's things." "But it was messy, Mom. He'll be happy when he wakes up and sees everything tidy." Thomas felt something he hadn't felt in years. His throat tightened with emotion. This child, who had probably never had more than $20 in her hands, had organized a fortune instead of taking a single penny. More than that, she made a point of telling her mother what she had done, with the innocent transparency of someone who has nothing to hide. What Thomas didn't know was that this simple gesture of honesty from a 6-year-old was about to set off a series of events that would not only change his own life, but reveal truths about prejudice, kindness, and the true value of people that he could never have imagined. If you're wondering how a child can teach life lessons to a billionaire, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because this story of transformation is just beginning, and what lies ahead will show that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected places. In the weeks that followed, Thomas continued to observe Diana and Jasmine discreetly. He discovered that Diana worked double shifts, cleaning at his company at night and cleaning at a doctor's office in the morning. Jasmine always accompanied her, doing her homework in the waiting room or playing quietly while her mother worked. What impressed Thomas most was the education Diana gave her daughter. "We always return what isn't ours, even if no one is watching," he heard her teach the little girl. "Our honesty is worth more than any money in the world." Diana had grown up in foster care after losing her parents at the age of 9. She struggled to graduate from high school while working, but was never able to afford college. At 22, she became pregnant with Jasmine, and the father disappeared when he found out. Since then, she had been supporting her daughter alone, refusing any kind of assistance she considered charity. Thomas began secretly increasing Diana's salary, instructing the personnel department to justify it as a category adjustment. But his good deed did not go unnoticed by the wrong eyes. Richard Blackwood, vice president of operations and a 50-year-old man accustomed to inherited privileges, noticed the financial movement during a meeting. "Thomas, why are we wasting extra money on cleaning staff? Especially on that specific employee. Diana is an excellent professional, Thomas replied dryly. Excellent. Richard laughed dismissively. Thomas, you need to understand where these people belong. Give them an extra coin and they'll soon be asking for the whole vault. It's in their nature. Thomas felt anger rising, but he kept his composure. Richard was the son of one of the company's founders and held significant shares. His prejudiced opinions had always been tolerated by the board because of his financial influence. Besides, Richard continued, she brings that child here. That's inappropriate. What kind of mother exposes a child to a corporate environment? Clearly, she doesn't have a proper family structure. That evening, Thomas witnessed something that made him furious. Richard had stayed late at work and ran into Diana in the hallway. Listen carefully, he said threateningly. I know you're getting more money than you deserve. I don't know what kind of favors you're doing, but it's going to stop. Diana turned pale. Sir, I don't understand. Of course you don't understand. People like you never do. You just take what you're given and keep quiet. And get that child out of here. This isn't a daycare center. Jasmine hid behind her mother, frightened by the aggressive tone. Diana hugged her daughter protectively. Sir, I'm just doing my job. Your job is to clean and be invisible. Nothing else. Thomas watched everything from his office, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, a purifying anger. Richard had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Not only had he insulted Diana, but he had frightened an innocent child whose only crime was accompanying her mother to work. That night, Thomas made a decision. It was no longer enough to stand by and watch. Richard Blackwood had revealed his true nature, and Thomas had the resources to do something about it. What Richard didn't know was that Thomas had recorded the entire conversation. The security system that Richard himself had approved to monitor employees now recorded his own poisonous words. But Thomas wanted more than just a recording. He wanted Richard to hang himself with his own words, publicly, in such a humiliating way that he would never be able to show his face in business circles again. The plan that began to form in his mind was ambitious, not only to protect Diana and Jasmine, but to use Richard's arrogance against him. Every new humiliation the man inflicted only strengthened something inside Thomas that had lain dormant for years, a thirst for justice that grew fueled by the very injustice he witnessed. What that privileged executive didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing his own sentence of defeat, and that a billionaire determined to protect an innocent family could be the most dangerous adversary someone like him would ever face. The next morning, Thomas made a call Richard could never have imagined. Marcus, I need your services again, he said on the phone to Marcus Chun, a former FBI investigator and expert in corporate cases. The two had worked together during the embezzlement case, and Marcus knew every dark corner of the business world. What kind of trouble now, Thomas? The kind that involves institutional racism and abuse of power. I need solid evidence against Richard Blackwood. Marcus laughed on the other end of the line. That daddy's boy? That'll be easier than stealing candy from a baby. Guys like him always leave clues. Meanwhile, Richard intensified his psychological terror campaign against Diana. On Monday, he showed up at the Human Resources Department with a list of fabricated violations. This employee has been arriving late on a regular basis, he lied to Sandra Miller, the HR director. And that child she brings with her is causing disturbances. Sandra, a competent woman in her 40s, knew something was wrong. Diana had never been late in 2 years on the job. Mr. Blackwood, I need to check the records. Records can be altered, Richard interrupted arrogantly. I'm the vice president. My word should be enough. Thomas watched everything through the security cameras, recording every word. The system Richard had installed to monitor productivity now recorded his own lies and abuses of authority. On Wednesday, Richard crossed an even more dangerous line. He intercepted Diana in the parking lot when she arrived with Jasmine for the night shift. "Listen carefully," he said, blocking her way to the entrance. "I know you're doing more than cleaning to earn that extra money. What kind of special services are you providing?" Diana trembled with anger and fear. "Sir, what you're implying is—" "I'm implying that people like you always have a price. And I'm curious to know what yours is." Jasmine hid behind her mother, whispering, "Mommy, why is that man being mean?" "Don't worry, my daughter," Diana replied with a dignity that contrasted with Richard's venom. "Some adults are unhappy and try to make other people unhappy too." Richard laughed cruelly. "Unhappy? I have more money in this wallet than you two will ever see in your entire lives. I should be worried about what people like you might do when you get too comfortable." Thomas watched the recording that night with a controlled rage that grew with each replay. Marcus had arrived with a preliminary dossier on Richard that confirmed his suspicions. The man had a history of bullying Black and Latino employees at previous jobs. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to documents. 3 labor lawsuits filed with out-of-court settlements. Always the same pattern: systematic humiliation until the person quits. And why was he never punished? Daddy paid for the silence and transferred his little boy to other companies when things got hot. Richard Blackwood is a professional parasite. Thomas studied every page of the report. Richard wasn't just prejudiced. He was a serial predator who used his position and money to torture vulnerable people. "Marcus, I want everything on him. Phone calls, emails, social media, behavior patterns. Everything." "Thomas, are you planning something big?" "I'm planning justice." On Thursday, Sandra Miller approached Thomas discreetly. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to talk to you about Richard Blackwood. He's pushing to fire Diana, but I don't have any legal grounds. They suspect there's something personal going on." Thomas feigned surprise. "What kind of pressure?" "He claims she's violating regulations, but when I check, I can't find any evidence. Yesterday he suggested that people like her shouldn't have access to administrative areas after business hours." "People like her?" Sandra hesitated. "Sir, I believe there are discriminatory implications in his conduct." It was the opening Thomas needed. "Sandra, if you suspect discrimination, you need to document everything officially. Open an internal investigation." "But he's the vice president." "And I'm the president. Document everything." That night, Thomas implemented Phase 2 of his plan. He instructed the IT department to install additional microphones in areas where Richard had been known to intimidate employees. Officially, it was an improvement to the security system. In reality, it was a digital trap. Friday night, when Richard thought he was alone in the office, he made a phone call. Thomas heard everything through the audio system. "Dad, that situation we talked about—" "Yes, the black cleaning lady. She's becoming a problem. I need you to use your contacts to create some legal difficulties for her. Suspicion of theft, problems with documentation, anything that will force her to resign." His father's voice echoed through the speaker. "Richard, are you sure you're not overreacting? A mere cleaning lady." "Dad, It's a matter of principle. If we allow these people to feel too comfortable, soon they'll be demanding rights they don't deserve. It's better to take care of this before other employees, similar ones, start getting ideas. Thomas recorded every word, feeling a cold satisfaction. Richard had just confessed to conspiracy to fabricate evidence and explicit racial discrimination. Marcus showed up at Thomas's office on Monday morning with a briefcase full of evidence. "Thomas, you won't believe what I found." Richard has posts on private social media that are true supremacist manifestos. Conversations in closed groups where he and other executives make jokes about black employees. There's more. I found out that he used his father's influence to sabotage black candidates in other companies' selection processes. There's a 15-year pattern of systematic discriminatory behavior. Thomas examined screenshots of conversations where Richard wrote things like, "Need to keep those monkeys in their place, and the only way to deal with these people is to show them who's boss from the start." Marcus, this is gold. Wait, there's more. He's planning something against Diana for this week. I intercepted messages from him organizing a staged theft. Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. What do you mean? He's going to plant something expensive in her cleaning supplies and then discover it publicly. He'll call the police, make a scene, humiliate her in front of everyone. At that moment, Thomas realized that Richard had completely underestimated who he was dealing with. The man thought he was dealing with a distracted boss and a defenseless employee. He had no idea he was walking straight into a trap that had been 15 years in the making. Thomas looked at Marcus with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Perfect. Let him try. The further he goes, the harder he'll fall. What Richard Blackwood didn't know was that every cruel move he made was being meticulously documented by someone who had turned protecting the innocent into an exact science, and who had unlimited resources to ensure that justice was served in such a devastating way that it would become legendary in business circles. The following Tuesday, Richard executed his sordid plan with the arrogant confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences. At 8 o'clock that evening, when Diana and Jasmine arrived for their cleaning shift, he had already planted a $15,000 Rolex watch in the cleaning cart. Perfect, Richard muttered to himself, watching from the security cameras. I'll give her 15 minutes to start work, then I'll catch her red-handed. What Richard didn't know was that Thomas was upstairs, watching his every move on high-resolution monitors. Marcus Chun was strategically positioned in the parking lot with a van full of recording equipment. 3 investigative journalists, discreetly contacted by Thomas, waited outside the building. "Marcus, he just planted the watch," Thomas reported via radio. "Activate the additional recordings." Confirmed. All the extra cameras are working. We have angles he doesn't even know exist. At 8:20, Richard descended to the office where Diana was quietly cleaning while Jasmine did her homework at a nearby table. He brought 2 security guards with him and pretended to be conducting a routine inspection. "Mrs. Diana," Richard said with false courtesy, "I need to check your cleaning supplies. We've had reports of missing items." Diana stopped cleaning, confused. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't understand." "It's standard procedure," Richard lied, walking directly to the cart where he had planted the watch. "Ah, how interesting. What's this?" He removed the Rolex with exaggerated theatricality, as if he had just discovered the Holy Grail. "Diana Jefferson, this is a $15,000 watch that went missing from Mr. Mitchell's office yesterday." Diana turned completely pale. "I've never seen this watch in my life." "Of course not," Richard said with poisonous sarcasm. "It just appeared on your cart, didn't it?" Jasmine stood up from her chair, frightened. "Mommy, what's going on?" "Be quiet, child," Richard ordered brutally. "Your mother will have to come with us to explain how expensive items magically appear in her materials." One of the security guards had already picked up the phone to call the police, exactly as Richard had instructed. "Police? We need to report a theft in progress." It was at that moment that Thomas appeared at the office door with Marcus and 3 people Richard didn't immediately recognize. "Richard," Thomas said with a calmness that made Richard's blood run cold. "I think you should hang up that phone." "Thomas, I'm glad you're here. We caught your employee stealing your watch." Thomas laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the silent office. "My watch? Richard, I've been wearing an Apple Watch for 5 years. I've never owned a Rolex." The confidence on Richard's face began to waver. What are you saying?" "I'm saying we just recorded you planting a watch you bought this morning. We have the receipt, in Diana's shopping cart to frame her." Marcus approached with a tablet, showing high-definition footage of Richard placing the watch in the cart 40 minutes earlier. "Angle 1, he said, swiping to the next video. "Angle 2. Angle 3. We even have your face clearly visible when you check to make sure no one is watching." Richard tried to speak, but Thomas interrupted him. "Oh, but there's so much more, Richard. Marcus, show him the scrapbook we put together." Marcus opened a digital file and began projecting its contents onto a portable screen. First came screenshots of Richard's racist posts in private groups. "Need to keep these monkeys in their place," Marcus read aloud. "That's yours, isn't it, Richard?" Diana gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Richard tried to get closer to the screen, but Thomas blocked him. "Here's your conversation planning to create legal difficulties for Diana," Marcus continued. "And here's your confession that it's a matter of principle to prevent these people from feeling comfortable. Where did you get this?" Richard stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Security system you approved yourself, remember? Including that call to your conspiracy-mongering father to fabricate evidence against an innocent employee." One of the journalists identified herself. "Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 News. Mr. Blackwood, would you like to comment on this evidence of systematic racial discrimination and conspiracy to fabricate criminal evidence?" Richard finally understood the magnitude of what was happening. "You can't use that. I have rights." "Of course you do," Thomas said calmly. "You have the right to remain silent, because anything you say will be used against you. Not just by the police, who are already on their way to arrest you for conspiracy and attempted defamation, but also by the press, the company board, and Diana's lawyers." Marcus continued the presentation. "We also have records of your 15 years of systematic discrimination in previous jobs. 3 lawsuits hushed up by Daddy, 8 Black and Latino employees you harassed until they quit. And best of all," Thomas interrupted, "we have recordings of you on cameras you didn't even know existed, including your threats to Diana in the parking lot and your disgusting sexual advances." The second reporter stepped forward with a camera. "Mr. Blackwood, how do you respond to the accusations that you used your position to systematically persecute minority employees?" Richard tried to run, but Marcus blocked the exit. "Oh, I almost forgot," Marcus said with a smile. "Your bank account was frozen an hour ago. Your family has already been notified of the contents of the evidence. and the company board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning to discuss your dismissal for cause and possible legal action." Diana, who had remained in shock throughout the revelation, finally found her voice. "Mr. Mitchell, did you know this was going to happen?" "Diana, I knew Richard was prejudiced, but I didn't imagine he would go so far as to try to destroy you with false evidence. When I discovered his plan, I decided it was time to stop watching passively." Jasmine approached Thomas timidly. "Mr. Thomas, will the bad man stop scaring Mommy now?" Thomas knelt down to the girl's height. "No, sweetheart. He'll never bother you again." Richard, desperate, made one last pathetic attempt. "Thomas, we can settle this between gentlemen. My family has significant investments in the company." "Had," Thomas corrected him. "Until 20 minutes ago, when the board voted unanimously to force the purchase of all Blackwood family shares. Congratulations, you've managed to ruin not only your own career, but also your family's fortune." The police arrived at that moment, but it wasn't Diana who was arrested. "Richard Blackwood," said Detective Harris, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to fabricate evidence, harassment, racial discrimination, and attempted defamation." As they handcuffed Richard, he looked at Diana with a hatred that finally revealed his true nature. "This won't stand. My family has influence." "Had," Marcus corrected again. "Until this morning, when the evidence was leaked to all major media outlets. Your father called 2 hours ago asking to be removed from the company's contact list." The third reporter approached Diana. "Ms. Jefferson, how does it feel to know that you have been completely vindicated and that your persecutor will face the full consequences?" Diana looked at Jasmine, then at Thomas. "I feel gratitude. Gratitude that there are people willing to fight for justice, even when it would be easier to ignore it." Thomas watched Richard being led away in handcuffs, knowing that the man faced not only prison but complete social and financial ruin. His reputation was ruined forever, his family had disowned him, and his career had ended so humiliatingly that it would become legendary in business circles. "Diana," Thomas said, "would you like to talk about a promotion?" As Diana smiled through her tears and Jasmine applauded without fully understanding what had happened, it was clear that justice had been served in such a devastating way that it would be remembered for generations, proving that underestimating human decency can be the most costly mistake anyone can make. 6 months later, Diana Jefferson walked through the halls of Mitchell Enterprises no longer as a cleaning lady, but as Director of Human Resources, a position Thomas had created especially for her after discovering her business degree that she had never been able to complete. Her first decision was to implement a scholarship program for employees' children, a program of which Jasmine would be the first beneficiary. "Mommy, can I show Mr. Thomas my new drawing?" asked Jasmine, now 7, running through the office that had become her second home. She attended the best private school in town and already spoke fluently about wanting to be a lawyer to help people like Mr. Thomas helped us. Thomas smiled, observing the complete transformation of their lives. His company had won awards for inclusion and diversity, becoming a national benchmark for hiring black people in executive positions. The Fair Chance program, created in honor of Diana's case, had already benefited more than 200 families. Meanwhile, Richard Blackwood was living a completely different reality. After serving 18 months in prison for racial discrimination and conspiracy, he was released to find that his reputation was completely destroyed. No reputable company would hire him. His wife had filed for divorce, taking half of their remaining assets. His children had changed their last name and refused to speak to him. The man who was once vice president of a large corporation now worked as a used car salesman, earning less in a year than Diana did in 3 months. His racist posts continued to circulate on the internet, preventing any attempt to rebuild his image. "Dad Thomas," Jasmine said during dinner at the new house Thomas had bought for them. "The teacher asked us to write about our heroes. Can I write about you?" Thomas felt tears well up in his eyes. "Jasmine, the real hero of this story is your mother, who taught you that honesty is worth more than any amount of money." Diana took Thomas's hand. "No, the hero is the one who had the courage to fight when it would have been easier to ignore it." The following week, Thomas received an unexpected call. "Mr. Mitchell, this is CNN reporter Michael Torres. I'd like to do a story on how your company became a model of inclusion after the Blackwood case." The story aired during prime time, showing Jasmine playing in the office where it all began, Diana working in her new role, and Thomas explaining how a 6-year-old had changed his view of justice and humanity. Richard watched the report from his one-bedroom apartment, drinking alone as he saw his old life thriving without him. He tried to call former colleagues, but they had all blocked his number. He tried to create new social media profiles, but his racist posts kept resurfacing, haunting him like digital ghosts from his past. 3 years later, on Jasmine's 10th birthday, Thomas made a special announcement during the birthday party. "Jasmine, Diana, you have changed my life in ways I can never fully repay. That is why I have created the Jasmine Jefferson Educational Fund, which will provide college scholarships to talented young black people for the next 50 years. Jasmine ran to hug him. "Thank you for believing in us when no one else did." That same day, Richard was trying to get a job at a gas station, but was rejected after the manager Googled his name and found the famous article about racial discrimination. His fall had been so complete and public that it became a case study in business schools about how prejudice and arrogance can destroy entire careers. Thomas realized that true revenge was never about destroying Richard. It was about building something bigger than he could ever imagine. He turned an ordinary company into a symbol of social justice, created opportunities for hundreds of people, and proved that integrity leads to genuine prosperity. "The honesty of a 6-year-old taught me that the best response to hatred is love in action," Thomas said during a speech at Harvard University. "Richard tried to bring us down, but he ended up lifting us to heights we never dreamed we could reach." Today, Jasmine is attending a prep school bound for Harvard. Diana has an MBA and is nationally recognized for her innovations in human resources, and Thomas has been honored by the government for his contributions to racial equality in the corporate environment. Richard? He still lives alone, working odd jobs, remembered only as an example of what happens when someone underestimates the power of human decency combined with the determination to do what is right. True justice was not Richard's imprisonment or his financial ruin. It was proving that kindness, when protected by strength, builds legacies that inspire generations. If this story of transformation touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that prove that doing good is always worth it, even when it seems impossible.